Located 20 miles from Mount Katahdin and Baxter State Park in the Penobscot River watershed, Millinocket is a struggling mill town in northern Maine. The paper mills were once economic engines of such enormous scale that the town earned the nickname Magic City because the influx of workers caused its population to grow at a rate that seemed boundless. Now the people of Millinocket are struggling to comprehend something else: how to reshape their economy as a destination for visitors eager to explore the beauty of the northern Maine outdoors. Millinocket is also home to the Whitehouse family. Ryan is a therapist and Beth is a teacher. They have 3 children: Gabe, who is 5, Olivia, who is 7, and 9-year-old Jacob. Early in Jacob's development, Ryan and Beth began to suspect something was wrong as he struggled to interpret the surrounding world.
Oh, it's just dirt. I thought you had a bug in your head. Say cheese. Say cheese. Say I love you, Daddy. Say I love you, Daddy.
When we first had any inkling that something might be wrong, he was probably 2. And he was not developing language. 6 months or so he was saying mama and dada and stuff like that, but he never went any further. He was not developing language at all.
We went into his room and he was in his crib and he wasn't facing us, and you'd said his name, he wouldn't turn around and respond. We'd yell, we'd clap, we'd try to make noises, but we still couldn't seem to, I guess, garner his attention. And so that's what prompted us to start just figuring out whether or not he had some sort of hearing problem.
He seemed so normal in every other aspect. At that time, his sensory needs weren't really all that apparent except for loud noises. And even then, sometimes something could happen right next to him that was a loud noise and it appeared as though it never even happened. I just remember being at my sister's one day and he had opened up this cupboard and all of the pots fell onto the floor and it was really loud and it made me want to cover my ears, but it was like it never even happened beside him. So that's why we thought, well, I mean, it possibly could be a hearing problem, but he could hear VeggieTales playing upstairs and then run from downstairs to go find the music that he hears that he thought was great. So, it just didn't add up.
Ryan and Beth sought answers from their primary care physician, but the advice they received left them less than satisfied.
Our primary care, who is a family doctor, he's not a strict pediatrician, really downplayed our symptoms. He was a boy. We kept hearing things like boys develop later. His grandfather didn't learn to talk until he was a little bit older. Clearly he has some sort of hearing problem. I wouldn't worry about it. And so we went from there to our ear, nose, and throat guy, who ended up putting in some tubes because Jacob did in fact have a lot of blockage behind his eardrums. And so we thought if we cleared up the hearing, then the language would come once he could hear that language. And we waited a couple of months for that and it didn't work.
In 2007, the American Academy of Pediatrics developed a policy statement that said that there was enough data to support using screening tools in practice so that we could do a better job of identifying developmental delay and autism early. What we learned really just in the last 5 to 10 years is that most children with developmental delay and autism are not being identified until they enter kindergarten. They're not beginning services to try and address their developmental delay or autism until closer to age 6. We can do better than this, and the screening tools can help us to move the age where children are identified to age 18 months, for language delay down to 9 months. And the earlier that we can begin intervention for most of these children, the better their outcome is going to be.
So we went back to our doctor, who referred us to a neurologist, and she decided that he had red flags that pointed towards autism, but also red flags that pointed towards ADHD or any number of different things. And we weren't really ready for a diagnosis yet. Kind of emotionally, we weren't really there. Plus, Beth's a teacher, and I'm a therapist, and we really didn't want him to put,
Labeled.
to have a label that would set the bar so low, and then no one would ever expect anything of him beyond that bar. We weren't ready for that. And so she called it PDD-NOS, Pervasive Developmental Disorder Not Otherwise Specified, which is something's not right, but we're not really sure what it is. And it was months after that that we ended up seeing the clinical pediatric psychologist who did some formal testing with Jacob, a lot of interviewing with us, and at the end of that day, she's the one that decided that yes, in fact, we did have autism.
Hearing the words, "Your child has autism," can overwhelm any parent, but Jacob's diagnosis elicited very different reactions from Beth and Ryan.
I had been going with him to therapies for quite a while before we got that diagnosis, something that had been thrown out there a few times already. Ryan was only saying that he was getting better in speech and that he was gaining speech, and so I don't know if we didn't talk about it a lot or what, but I saw it coming. It wasn't surprising to me. I didn't walk away from that appointment going, oh man, what are we going to do? It was sort of okay, now we have our diagnosis. I knew this was coming. Hopefully we'll be able to get some services for him, some more services, and be able to help him more.
I was floored because we had gotten the PDD-NOS diagnosis, which for me was a halfway diagnosis, and then we had really hit the speech and the occupational therapy pretty hard, and he was making gains. So I thought, well, if we get this halfway diagnosis and then over these few months we've gotten better, that somebody's going to say, oh yeah, he'll be fine, don't worry about it. So when we got the full-on capital A autism, I was completely floored. Because as a dad, you picture fishing with your son and playing pass and talking about girls and doing whatever it is dads and sons do, and suddenly that wasn't there anymore. For me, completely overnight, because I'm denial, I guess probably what you call it.
He took exactly about 24 hours to grieve the loss of what he thought he was going to have. And then he said, all right, now what? I mean, we literally just took the bull by the horns at that point. We started doing a lot of research. We read a lot of books. We read Temple Grandin's book. We read any article we could get our hands on.
Oh, thank you.
Because, I mean, this is what it was going to be. Then there's no point in sitting around and crying about it.
Jacob, like many living with autism, has difficulty filtering sensory input, impeding his ability to perceive the world as would a person without autism.
His sensory issues certainly steer every portion of his life. When they're in check or when we can help him take care of them, he is more likely to learn and he's more likely to be able to focus. But as of right now, he's doing really, really well. We've been seeing our OT in Bangor quite frequently in order to get him where he is right now. I'd say at the beginning of the school year, it was really hard on him. Some parts of this winter were really hard. And I think mostly it's everything. It's everything around him and him unable to shut everything out.
Originally, back in the day, if you want to call it that, he had a really hard time with textures. Certain clothing, pudding, oatmeal, mashed potatoes, things like that. He once picked up a really ripe tomato and he squished his thumb into it and threw up right on the spot. I mean, the thought of feeding the child pudding would never ever have happened. I mean, all of that just he was that sensitive to everything. And then somewhere along the line, we discovered...
We went to see Leslie.
3, 2, 1, and blast off.
She's our OT out of Bangor, and she was amazing.
Leslie was a godsend. She got us set up with a brushing routine, with joint compressions, with just overall just squeezing him, really rough play. He really likes that. Therapeutic listening, just a bunch of different interventions that we've done through Leslie. Swings, all kinds of different contraptions and manual tricks that has got him to the point where he functions really, really well with a set of headphones, which seem to not only dampen out the sound, but also just sort of dampen everything that surrounds him. He has a really hard time focusing.
Youngsters with autism need to do very controlled activities to help their bodies make sense of the environmental information. And we OTs call that input. So we want to do specific things, specific input that helps them recognize, oh, I need to sit upright and not slump, or oh, my limbs are here instead of here, or oh gosh, when I hear that sound doesn't bother me as much anymore. And what we do is try to show families how to do these certain activities daily so that they can better interpret the information that the world is offering them.
Jacob also struggles with language. In order to express his needs, he mimics phrases which he hears from his children's videos. This is called echolalia, the echoing of whole, unanalyzed expressions. Many individuals with autism do develop speech, but not all children with autism develop functional speech.
Jake's language isn't, he doesn't enunciate very well. And a lot of what he uses for his speech is language he's picked up from somewhere else. He only has to watch a video a time or two, and he can repeat almost every line. And when he's trying to talk to you, sometimes he will fall back on gibberish that we as his parents recognize from a movie. Or he's at the point now where he can start to more functionally use lines from films in everyday conversation.
Most children with autism have a speech language delay, or they're very odd language. Some children with autism will memorize certain phrases, and they will use those phrases in response to a question. So it will sound like the child answered with a sentence, but in fact it was a memorized phrase. It was like that phrase itself is just a single word.
Like most 9-year-olds, Jacob loves to be outside, riding his bike and playing to the point of exhaustion on the playground. Jacob is also fascinated by the Sesame Street video Ryan and Beth put on to ensure an uninterrupted hour to get ready in the morning or while preparing dinner. Trains initially intrigued Jacob, but then he developed a passion for airplanes. An interest that came out of planning for a family vacation in Florida.
In researching our big Disney trip, we started thinking of everything that would even impact Jacob at all. We ended up with a private cabin, we did this, we did it all tailored for him. And we were really successful, but a lot of it had to do with our preparation. So we spent a lot of time on YouTube looking at videos, and that sort of it spawned from there.
Fixation on certain items or subjects is common in a child with autism. Another common characteristic in children with autism is self-stimulating behavior, or stimming. Stimming is a learned behavior which is often repeated. It can serve as a calming exercise.
He doesn't stim so much anymore like he used to. He used to do it on the rungs of the park fence.
Yeah, he
would run by them really fast, and he would do this, like, the whole time we were at the park, and we couldn't figure it out at first.
Or spinning wheels, or those sort of self-soothing things. He's not one to flap his hands really anymore, or any of the stereotypically autistic.
No, but we've taught him some other things now, like jumping, running, and riding his bike is very soothing for him. But when he needs quiet time, he almost always wants to hit the computer to watch videos of planes taking off.
So it's like candy or a sometimes food. We let him have some, but we don't let him live there, because we don't want to get him into the necessity of having something that isn't interacting with the rest of us. That's where he kind of retreats. It's a little safe spot. It's always the same video games. It's always the same movies. It's always the same YouTube clips. It's anything that has a very consistent ending for him, and therefore it's safe. He knows what's coming up next. He knows when it ends. He knows where everything is. He likes that. Interacting with us, you don't know what's going to happen next.
Jacob's natural curiosity presents challenges for Ryan and Beth. His safety is a constant concern.
I mean, he wouldn't think a second thing of picking a knife up off the counter. You have to constantly be aware of his surroundings. You can't leave him alone. With his bike, he doesn't really watch. He can see, he knows when cars are coming, but he wouldn't think twice about going across the street without looking. It's just a constant, you have to constantly prompt him to remember to look.
We change our expectations of what our outdoor time is going to look like. We like to go for walks, but there's traffic. And there's the opportunity for Jacob to get hurt somewhere. So we go to some deserted dirt road around here, which there's plenty of, and we walk there, where our chances of seeing another vehicle are very, very slim. And he can run and jump and play and be a boy, but still be in a safe situation. So we tailor everything we do to make it as safe as we can for Jacob.
A chance encounter with a service dog at an autism conference opened the door for additional help in ensuring Jacob's safety. The animal serves as an extra pair of eyes for Beth and Ryan.
It all started at the Autism Resource Fair in Augusta, where all these different, providers of different services related to the autism community show up and show off their wares. And Jacob has never been one to like dogs because they're unpredictable. and they jump and they want your attention, and he's not really ever like that too much at all. So Tail Wagon Training Center had a number of their service dogs sitting at attention, very well behaved, and Jacob just kept sort of circling closer and closer and closer to these dogs, and eventually touched one who didn't lick, didn't snap, didn't roll over, didn't show any kind of, that dog was on duty. And Jacob ran back to me and said, "I happy." And that was it. That was it. I went to the guy and said, "I need one of those dogs. What do you do to get a dog?" Yeah. And it was quite a process.
Well, it was one of the first times he had spontaneously said anything. Yeah. And so we were very excited about that.
It took over a year before the proper service animal was found and trained to meet Jacob's specific needs. Once the proper fit was in place, Jacob began to immediately benefit.
When he's tethered to the dog, he cannot run out into the street. Jacob used to be a huge flight risk.
Yeah. So the dog weighs like 95 pounds. He's a big strapping lab, and he has a big harness that goes around his chest and back where there's a leather handle that Jacob hangs onto. Jacob has a belt that clips onto the dog's harness. We've trained Jacob and the dog that we're only going to go anywhere if the boy is hanging onto the dog. If he lets go of the handle, the dog stops. On our command, not just because he's a really smart dog. And then Jacob knows that he needs to pull himself together, hang back onto his dog, or we're not going any further. We command the dog with a gentle lead around the dog's muzzle. And so if we're crossing the street or we're going to a busy intersection or busy anywhere, and Jacob tries to bolt, I can tell that dog to stay, and that 95-pound dog will not budge. Whether Jacob tugs on him, pulls on him, kicks at him, anything, that dog will not move. And so it's just an extra pair of hands.
The Whitehouses, like all families navigating the world with children who have been diagnosed with autism, living with siblings who don't have autism, hope they have struck the proper balance between meeting all of their individual needs. The future of the Whitehouse children who don't have autism is more straightforward to plan. Jacob's future is a bit more complicated for Beth and Ryan.
Yeah, we're scared to death.
Yeah, we are. I think all of this was scary at one point, and then we get there to the next point, and it's no longer as scary as we thought it was going to be. There aren't a lot of services out there for adults, and I think that we need to advocate for those now, so that when Jacob is an adult, he can have that. And Ryan and I don't just advocate for Jacob; we try to advocate for everybody. So I'm hoping that we can make gains in that area, but long before he's ever going to need services.
The big plan is for Jacob to be as independent as he can be. If he gets a job and a wife and a house and a family and a life on his own, fantastic. If he never progresses out of our spare bedroom, that's fine too.
We're fine with that too.
Ryan and Beth are learning how to meet Jacob's unique needs. Whatever the future holds for Jacob, he won't be facing life's adversities alone. Ryan and Beth are committed to nurturing his strengths, allowing him to reach his fullest potential, regardless of the obstacles autism presents.
He's not a label. He's not a set of circumstances you think he is.
And with all of his challenges and the barriers and things that he has, he is quite an amazing kid under all of that.
He's awesome. He's not autism. He's a kid with autism.
Learn more about autism online. Visit www.mpbn.net/autism.